Good luck. So, today at lunch, I offered time to sit with people in office hours, which is common in the United States. Professors have office hours. After today, I won't be doing any more lecturing, but hopefully I'll be a small part of your other activities. And you should feel free to come talk to me about something if you would like. Something that you're interested in. I'll be happy to talk to you. So, right now, I have Thursday, I'll probably go to Santiago because I've always liked to go there, so I'll probably do that on Thursday. But even Thursday evening, you know, come back and drink a beer or something like that. Friday, Saturday, I'm flying, I think Saturday morning, so I won't be here for your final presentation. So Friday night, I'll subsidize a little bit of alcohol consumption, very little. This last set of slides, this last discussion, I'm going to make a strong argument that I do not feel strongly about. Okay? I'm going to make a strong argument. At one point, I'm going to make a strong argument that I don't have a lot of confidence in. Okay? But I'm going to do it, and I'm telling you right now, to show you, to be an example to you. Because in your professional life, there will be times when you're going to have to, stand up and say something you may not entirely believe in, and take some criticism. And that's good. Okay? And I'm also doing it because I'm curious about your reaction. I want to see how you react. I want to see how you react to it. So this first part, though, the first couple of slides are nothing, there's going to be a lot of obvious things. Nothing controversial. Okay? First thing, let's consider, and you can predict by now some of what I'm going to say. Okay? Because you've heard me talk about some of these things. So you should know the way that I sort of think. I think in terms of processes, in terms of systems, in terms of relationships, right? In terms of choices, but also in terms of habits. Right? So when you consider some of the big challenges that we share really around the world, right? We share some big principal challenges. They are organizational habits. Right? And they are habits that we want to emulate, that we want to copy. Habits we want to copy from other places. One example of that is the consumption of meat. Everybody knows that the consumption of meat requires about 12 times more resources than the consumption of vegetables. 12 times as much water, grain, 12 times as much energy is required to produce meat than to produce an equivalent calories of vegetables. And China, as a developing nation, is trying to achieve the same calorie consumption of meat that is enjoyed, it's a public health problem too, in the United States. And if that happens, that's a lot of meat. Because right now they consume about 15%, about 1/5, 15-20% of the amount of meat that is consumed in the US. And there's 5 times the population. Right? So you can imagine a vast, very significant challenge that comes when people want to change from one set of habits to another set of habits. Okay? But one of the big challenges that we face on both continents with respect to our food system, with respect to urban agriculture, is people aren't used to new things. They're not used to urban agriculture. It's not part of their habitual way of thinking about their world. And that challenge is one that scenario planning of the sort that you're going to be thinking of with Odd tonight is meant to overcome. And the way that works is largely through narrative, through storytelling. We tell a story about how we changed our landscape, right? And we connect that change in our physical environment with other positive changes in our life, and we tell a story about it. And then other people say, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll experiment. Maybe I'll try that. And so slowly change diffuses in that way. People, one of the things that you're going to be doing that I will talk about tonight and that tomorrow night we'll discuss further is how it is that we present possible futures to people so that they understand their present day individualism, their selfishness, their present day self in the context of a larger, more community-oriented future. Okay? Business challenges. Businesses have habitual relationships as well. But businesses sometimes are more easy to convince when you indicate to them how their profit and loss changes with changing habits. Businesses can be convinced pretty easy when you put it in economic terms. That's why you see big composting initiatives in the US. That's why you see big local food systems around postmodern businesses like software, right? That's why you see food system changes in cities that are trying to attract the creative class, artistic people and new types of businesses, because those people will be attracted to quality of life components of their city. And urban agriculture can be a great addition to quality of life. It can enhance quality of life, everything from landscapes, right, through floriscaping, right, through flowers and other things, through edible foods, through markets, through how one disposes, how one reduces their carbon footprint. You guys all know about carbon footprints. Businesses know all about carbon footprints, right? But regular households, they don't understand that quite as easily. They don't have the same understanding of it. So existing organizational habits in business are often easier to change than in households. Government, same thing. Governments have habits. They have typical ways, Andres is confronting, the typical ways of the government playing a role in civil society. So he says, oh, I was like Don Quixote, trying to get some people interested in what I was doing. Right? That's a problem. That's difficult, right? But governments also, once one part of government sees the importance of something, they influence other parts of government. When public health department understands something, then they can, then slowly, that knowledge will diffuse to other parts of government. Because people start to see how their activities are interconnected, how they work together. Now, both continents, I think, share some real opportunities. They share opportunities in policy and law. Right? In the United States, there's a lot of legal changes going on around the food system. Not all those legal changes are going to survive, right? Because they could be challenged by crazy things like a chicken, what I was talking about earlier, right? We don't know. Not every policy survives. But even as I say that, when we were at lunch, Ruth turned to me and said, I have chickens in my yard, and she said, Jos does too, and I asked her, well, how many people have chickens? And she said, maybe 2% of Dutch households, maybe one on, every other block or something like that, maybe 1 in 50 households has chickens. And she said, and nobody ever thinks about it. We don't even have any idea about the law associated with it. But she said, but we kind of are like the United States in that we look to the United States as an example. And so if in the United States there begins to be laws of this sort, they could be beneficial, but they also might be taken in a negative way in the Dutch environment. We just, we don't know. We just don't know. But I would argue, I think that legal changes are important. All right? I'm going to give you an example of how, though, putting legal changes to work can be really difficult when we look at an EU law on organic food. Okay? Another opportunity we have is that many people, especially young people, are very aware of and critical of the existing food system. There's increasing awareness and increasing critical approach, critical attitude. Got to harness that energy. How do we get that energy? How do we recruit that to positive change? Then we also have the general crisis, this general economic crisis, in which people are looking for non-traditional ways of earning income, non-traditional ways of purchasing groceries, non-traditional ways of looking at the entire food system. So in some regards, you know the old Chinese saying, right? The Chinese symbol for crisis is the same as opportunity. Right? Crises, big problems, if you remember that flow of experience slide, right? Big problems often cause people to experiment. And so this crisis that we have is an opportunity for experimentation. The big question is, where will the coordination come from? Where will the resources come from to bridge from our current situation to a new, maybe disorganized, right, with so many things going on, but to the new future that we're working towards, that we're passing towards every day? Coordination and resources, right? What sorts of relationships and what sorts of resources will be making a difference there? Okay. Now, between the two comments, something else I can say that's not controversial is that there's a lot of relatively similar public sector and private initiatives. So in the EU, there's the COST initiative on urban agriculture. COST is a big EU consortium that does educational and education research on a lot of different topics. There's one on urban agriculture. In the US, the comparable initiative is the United States Department of Agriculture. In both instances, there's a lot of interdisciplinary work going on. That's very promising. It's very promising. One of the other questions is, what is it that we seek? The very first, what is the goals that we have in mind? The very first lecture, I said, well, you know, in Europe, it seems like that there's, well, here, let me just say. I want to say the wrong thing here, let me see. Let me put it this way. One of the big questions is what are the goals of the different organizations, okay? What are the goals that the people have? And how are they the same or how are they different? In the US, one of the big things that I've mentioned is that there seems to be a power conflict, that it's power that people want, and they see themselves as getting power through urban agriculture, through community. In Europe, I'm not sure that it's power necessarily per se that motivates people, okay? Perhaps in Europe, what seems to be motivating some food system changes is the relative uniqueness of regional identity, right? So there's these regional identities that there's some homogeneity, there's some similarity within that identity, within the food culture, the food practices, the organization of the food in that area. And if around that, people can organize goals to achieve. I'm not sure. We can argue about that, right? Now, either way, I think one of the outcomes that we should look for is new concepts. We should try and generate new concepts. So the word you've heard me use is speciation in the food system. So I've said to you that a robust, a resilient, an active, a wonderful ecology is one where there's a lot of relationships. Not necessarily like a real ecology where everything's fighting and eating everything else. I mean, that's a robust ecology, right? But an ecology where partnerships and coordination help foster the health, the overall health of the ecology, of in this case of the society. So now then there's some more specific sorts of outcomes, like can we reduce the amount of energy that a place requires? Can we increase the amount of energy that a place is producing? So there are some things that we can measure. Can we decrease obesity? Can we increase health activity? Can we decrease the incidence of other food-related disease? Can we increase interaction and sociability, good social relationships between people? Social scientists, public health scientists, they do studies of these kinds all the time. We can use that information to help determine outcomes that urban agriculture might affect. Okay. Now, one of the things that I can tell you about in the United States is that there is a huge amount of energy. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the U.S., a lot of excitement around community food, around food systems generally speaking. There's even among venture capitalists, among large-scale investors, there's a lot of interest. Okay? And so, currently, most food system activities are done through grant funding of private foundations or the federal government. But slowly, as these businesses develop working procedures, good working habits, good working procedures, and start making money, then they're going to attract the interest of private capital as well. And that will mark a significant change. This is that question of slow money, for instance. The energy that I'm talking about, the enthusiasm, can also be released. Law can release this enthusiasm. Law does not have to constrain us. Law should free us, should enable us. In the United States, this thesis was first articulated to describe the incredible growth of the American economy in the 1880s, 1890s. And it was done by a legal historian named Willard Hearst. And it's simply called the release of energy thesis. And so law, under the right conditions, law can produce a lot of positive activity. Right? Organizing ordinances and law the right way. Something else we should not be aware of, that we should not be afraid of, that we should be aware of, is conflict. How many of you have been in a long-term relationship with another person? Raise your hands if you've been in a long-term relationship with another person. Okay. Those of you who have know that fighting can actually be good. Making up is fun. Right? Those of you who have not been in a long dating relationship with somebody, where you go out together as a couple for a long time, you fight, and then you kiss and make up. Right? That's the idea. Right? So, conflict can be good. Arguments are moments in good conversations. Arguments are moments in good conversations. We shouldn't shy away from conflict. Likewise, we should not be afraid to change our mind and admit we're wrong. Because you're going to be wrong sometimes. I'm never wrong. No, I'm sorry. My wife is never wrong. Tell her that. Romero at engr.wisc.edu. Conflict can mobilize. When there's a conflict, you see who your allies are. Right? So you see who your allies are? And another thing that conflict does, or problem does, is it disrupts you. It makes you rethink what you're doing. And that's important. That's important. So it's one of the things that we should remember, though, is through this release of energy, through these conflicts, will come a lot of very interesting stories. Those stories will be useful tools for you to inform other people about changes you're familiar with. Right? Those stories will be tools to you. But you can't let the stories become reality itself. They're history. After after a big conflict happens or after some success you have, you'll have a story to tell about it. In a couple of years, though, after some time passes, you can't rely only on that story, because the alliances, the relationships will change, the problems will change, the society will look a little different. So you have to respond to that situation, not to the success, right? The success is useful, it helps you think, but it's not going to necessarily make you successful every time. Likewise, you're going to lose some fights. Professionally, you're going to lose some fights. With communities you work with, there are times you will not be successful. You cannot let the stories that are associated with that defeat your future efforts. Right? Instead, you've got to use those things as resources for reflection. Whether you win or lose, you got to be professional and, keep on going. So, conflict is useful. It has uses for you yourself individually, professionally, and it has uses for you in your work with your community. But you got to recognize that that community is always going to be changing too. There's going to be changes. One other thing that I neglected to say about cost, okay, about the EU initiative. They are preparing a toolbox, they call it, for food system activity, okay, where there will be laws and ordinances, model ordinances. This is kind of similar. In the U.S., we have similar organizations that do this, but they're not at the level of the entire United States. They're usually small, nonprofit organizations that establish model, exemplary, significant, tested laws and ordinances that people can use. There are also organizations in the U.S. that foster public dialogue about different issues. So one of them is called the Interactivity Foundation. And the Interactivity Foundation, their job is to bring groups of people together to talk about issues. Not to have a position, but to be aware of the different issues. And the Interactivity Foundation made a food discussion guide. A food discussion guide that's 18 pages long. And in the history of that organization, that discussion guide has outsold, they give them away for free. Okay? And they have given away more of that guide than any other guide they've produced, times 3. Right? So they've given away thousands and thousands of these guides to help people talk about their food system. That's a lot of energy at the local level. So there are a number of ways that people can start to intervene or to make a difference in their food system. There are challenges and there are opportunities that we face. Now I'm going to make an argument to you. Okay? I'm going to argue to you that the difference, though, in the United States and the European Union, that there are 4 big things that explain the differences between the EU and the US. Okay? One of them is density. In Europe, you live in a much denser society than we do in the US. And that density may inhibit urban agriculture. I'm going to say to you that urban agriculture may not play a significant role in feeding Europe because of this density. Okay? That instead, what urban agriculture in European cities will do is make it more beautiful. So cities will be prettier, but they won't be fuller. They won't be less hungry because of urban agriculture. Now maybe the whole community food system will make a difference, but I'm going to argue that urban agriculture isn't going to make a difference. Come on, let's fight. Labels and laws. The difference in labeling and in laws in the 2 continents, there's a number of positive things to say about this, but in Europe, the reason why community regional food may be an effective approach is because laws in the European Union come down in very different ways. There's laws that come from Brussels, but there are also laws associated with autonomous states and provinces and regions. And food labeling is important to those things, like Parma, right? Parmesan from Parma. Or, you know, different the wine appellations in France. You know, different sorts of markers, of labels, make a difference. Now let me give you an example of more conflict in this regard. iPhone is a European organization that does work on food law between the US and Europe. And they did a long analysis of organic laws in Europe and in the US. And they found that there were a lot of differences between the food laws. Now a year ago, when there was an announcement, oh, Europe and the US have gone together on organic standards, everybody was happy. Everybody said, oh, new markets will open up. You know, Europeans will sell more in the US will sell more in Europe, and it's going to be wonderful and great. A month ago, a guy in Portugal wrote this 5-page letter that said, no way, this may not be the case. There's actually big differences in pesticides, in the use of organic or inorganic chemical fertilizers, in the amount of antibiotics applied to animals, in all sorts of ways that show that there's actually pretty big differences still between the continents. And the markets may not be so important, or may not be as open as people think they are. So I invite you to take a look at that if you have a chance. Finally, another thing that there's a big difference in the US and Europe is that Europeans are elitist.
A what?
Elitist. You're a bunch of elitist snobs in Europe. Right?
Provocative.
Yeah, I'm provocative. What the? Yeah, even you, buddy. I'm being provocative. Right? It's the last lecture, I gotta try, right? And where are the elitists? Over the notion of terrain, right? Over this notion of the uniqueness of particular places. That provides a sort of an eliteness and of a boundary, of creating boundaries that are artificial. They're about status and not about other, perhaps more important things. So, terrain, place. And then finally, I'm going to argue that in the US, we are more egalitarian. Conversely, right, if Europeans are more elitist, Americans are more egalitarian, right? And that egalitarianism, it shows up in the fight that Americans are putting up to get control over parts of their food system. Now, I'll be the first to tell you at the beginning of the crisis, I was in Berlin, and I saw like 250,000 Germans marching down, workers' rights, So, I'm not saying that this is uniform, but I'm trying to get you to think a little bit. In the US, around food, power is what people want. People want power over, they want control over part of their food system. And in the EU, all people want is the integrity. They want to foster the integrity of their region's food. Right? They want that integrity. Okay. So, what do you think about my argument? Does anybody have any responses to these? Yes.
I have a question.
Go
When
ahead.
you say elitist, do you mean regional products like champagne or?
Right, that's what I'm.
Okay, yeah, Fanta in Greece or whatever.
Right. That's what I'm. That there's and I mean a good counter argument is, sure, yeah, okay, we should be elitist in this regard because feta really is wholly Greek product, and their economic livelihood, whatever's left of it, right, depends in some regards on being able to be in control of some of these things, you know. And then the counter argument is, well, you know, the neoliberal counter argument is you know, you guys won't grow up, your society won't grow up, and so too bad for you. And then the, you know, sort of another more democratic counter argument is, well, too bad, you know, if the state would adopt friendlier non-austerity, if the Europeans would learn to get along a little bit better and coax the Greeks into they wouldn't adopt austerity policies. And do you kind of see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You know, so I mean, we can go back and forth in all sorts of ways about it. But yeah, that's what I mean. Does anybody else have questions? I hope you understood what I was trying to. I think you did. What
The daily test action about terrain and place, that's about the regional identity. That's what you mean?
It is.
Then I understand, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. What do people think?
Will density inhibit urban agriculture?
Yeah, what do you think?
Important question.
I think it doesn't. You just have to have a work in Lugo to realize it doesn't.
I don't know. We don't have, what's the measure? You got to show me how much food people are growing.
Yeah, I know, but it's not a matter of quantity, but of, well, of taking advantage of the free available space. You can't intend to feed all the people in a city.
So you advance livability as a goal instead of security. So food security, maybe I can specify this. I said it right off. I said urban ag makes no difference.
Well,
now you say, oh, but people are growing. Well, you know, so it looks nice, right? But does it create food security? Well, no, it won't create food security. Well, what's important then?
Well, because
you know,
you put it forward in a very limited place. You're talking about the city, but you have all the surrounding suburban area. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of food security, maybe we should take into account these suburban areas we could produce for the city.
Sure, that's right. So what we have then is we need to think about where our boundaries are drawn, right? How do we draw these boundaries? How do we advance many goals at the same time? Not just improve food security. Maybe we cannot achieve it. Maybe we improve it. Words make a difference, right? How you discuss it. Maybe we improve quality of life, right? Maybe it's one component of an overall strategy, right? So the environmental people see it as a quality of life thing. Economic development people see it as a regional economic initiative. Right? Somebody else sees it some other way. The point being, I simply argued, for the sake of argument, just to try and provoke you, I said, urban ag doesn't matter. To invite you to have that kind of response. Well, maybe it matters for these things. And maybe its final goal isn't, maybe it's not the only thing we do, but it's something that helps us achieve a variety of other goals. You see what I mean? So that's the sort of thing I was trying to stimulate, sort of conversation. But everybody's tired, huh? So am I. I'm tired too. Does anybody have any other comments about this?
Yeah, for the density, if it inhibits urban agriculture, I don't think it will, because urban agriculture is a growing habit, and the cities are already there, the density is already there, and you can never food a whole flats with urban agriculture. You always need it from the rural areas or wider abroad. So it will grow, but it will not innovate at the moment.
Okay, there we go. It will grow. It will then require trade, right? It will also then come into conflict with sustainability and other sorts of things, but it always has, right? I mean, to me, the interesting thing about food is any position someone has taken, anything someone has argued, has been argued by somebody else. And all the negative consequences have been experienced by other people. It's a matter of just becoming aware again of our history of food. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, Anna has just said that here in Galicia we're still very self-sufficient concerning producing our food. And you know, there's a lot of my parents go to the rural areas nearby my town. It's an 8,000 inhabitant town. And they go to the rural areas to get food from their friends. So, and we've had the chance to ratify this in the municipal market. Most of the producers there were people who had their vegetable gardens, and they sold the extra food they produce.
Absolutely. Well, where will there be, extra in the future, right? We have where we are. Some regions are more self-sufficient. Some are more resilient, right? They've established strong partnerships within the region or between the region and other parts of the world. There's a lot of open questions here. And so one of the big things to try and figure out is what futures we're interested in trying to work towards. And you're going to get some experience in that today, right? Later today later today and tomorrow, we're going to start thinking about possible futures for the food system. And we're going to get some reactions from people about what they think. But as for me, let me leave you with one thought. Thank you. Okay? Thank you. Dios, Ruth, Andres, Urbano, wherever you are, Rafael, wherever you are, Jose Maria, who's in Santiago right now. I really appreciate this opportunity. I get to speak with groups of different kinds pretty regularly, and I'm very fortunate for that. And every single time I do it, I wish I could do it again, because I would do it better. But I've done the best I could this time. Okay? And that's what I try and do everywhere I go. And I appreciate your attention. You have honored me and respected me through your attention. And I appreciate that. And I hope you see that I've tried to honor and respect you through giving you my attention.
You did.
So I wish you all a good afternoon. I don't have anything else for you. What's next?
Well, now we would have the round table that I put it forward as a dialogue with the people who is in the room and Professor Morales, or well, between everybody. But unfortunately, nobody's showed up. So we could discuss what we've seen so far in Lugo and just to make some diagnostic, of what do you think, how do you think we could implement all what we've seen here in Lugo, and which would be the shortcomings. And I would thank the Spanish students to participate, because you know better our reality. Okay? And if nobody has nothing to say, we can just leave and have a rest until the next activity.
Which is an I-beta, right?
Yeah, it's an I-beta. Well, you can speak in Spanish if you want and translate to the rest of the audience. Bueno, ¿cuál crees? Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak a little bit in Spanish, okay? Bueno, acabáis de ver un montón de iniciativas que explicó el profesor Morales. Y el debate que habría ahora sería para ver cómo podemos trasladar esto a Lugo, ¿no? ¿Qué problemas se podrían encontrar? ¿Qué oportunidades? Y con el conocimiento que tenéis vosotros sobre el área de estudio, bueno, ti no, pero... Sí, ¿qué consideras que podría haber positivo, que se podría implementar? ¿Qué dificultades podría haber? Elisa.
No, eu queria proponer que igual podíamos también decir igual, cada un pouco que concepto que se ten cada un do uso dos alimentos, cada un como ve, si eles tamén igual a comprar no supermercado como preferibles e de eso igual surge algo de esto, ¿no?
Vale.
Quero dicir, que non sei, porque nós como falamos outro día nos grupos, ben, pero por exemplo non sei como ven meus compañeros.
Okay. Well, Elisa says that it would be better to talk about how do they purchase their food, because this conversation showed up in the groups yesterday, and maybe it would be more interesting to discuss about that now. Okay?
Discuss what?
About, well,
because I think here in Spain you have a really strong tradition of agriculture, but me like a foreigner, I see a lot of contrast in the real life, urban life, and country areas. So, and that surprised me. Because a lot of people, they have families with gardens, with vegetables, but then in city they change attitudes, actúan diferente, que compran otras cosas no boas.
yeah, I know, but you know, well, as concerning my personal experience, I work here at the university 8 hours a day, and when I leave, the only thing that is open is the supermarket. You know? Yeah, and I would like to go to buy local products to the local market, but we only have local producers there twice a week, although you can also purchase local products because the permanent stars, they have cheeses and cold cuts. We have been products in the province, but it's hard for me to take a bus when I leave work, and probably when I arrive there the market is closed.
But maybe it's not so difficult to change products which are offered, for example, concretely here in the university, in cafes.
Yeah, I know. Maybe
no,
we like initiatives that we should discuss in this workshop, how to implement them, and which are the shortcomings that may arise. Okay.
And also, I don't know. There are a lot of gardens and experimental gardens outside, and are also used the vegetables to offer here to eat.
Yeah, well, they are not, unlikely, but
right?
for example, in the University of Ponte de Lima in Portugal, they have orchards, and the students go there to work in the orchards, and then the production is offered in the cafeteria. But, well, you know, I think it was you mentioned.
I think you should explain this term orchards.
Eh?
This one.
Orchards. Hortas. Son hortas con frutales.
Sí.
Sí.
Pero en inglés.
Sí.
Ah, okay. I'm sorry.
Orchards. Escrito orchards. Vale. Yeah, but likely there is a lot of concerns in the UC, and I think it's due to the vegetable gardens in Rato River, because there are several. Anna herself has hired a vegetable garden in the Rato River for 2 years.
A small garden, and you could pay everything.
Yeah, you could plant there everything you want.
They give the plants,
I know it, but for example, here in university, does university collaborate with with the Rato River gardens?
No, there's not a collaboration, but this initiative, this initiative has fostered another one of the university intends to create vegetable gardens here in Abaguada Park. The one we cross every day to go to have lunch to the cafeteria. And they even have made courses on urban agriculture. There's been recently a course on container gardens. Sí, jardines en contenedores.
Que son transportadas.
No, just in balconies, in houses, or in terraces. You can start one of these. Yeah, I did. I also have tomatoes, but for.
But there are like, yeah, just plants and yes, vegetable plants and yeah. Yeah, that's normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Espera, do you have something to say to add? Pero en castellano, lo traduzco.
Que aquí en la Marina hay gente que hace huertos urbanos que, o sea, son en los jardines, son no los grandes, son en los balcones, hay como macetas grandes y eso sí que se puede captar. Y la gente planta las ensaladas y cosas de esas y se les intercambia entre el grupo que son.
Okay, in students' residence nearby, Baligai, this blue building, at the other side of the street here in front of the business administration faculty, people in their bedrooms, they grow vegetables in pots on the window sills. And then they share this production between them. Well, there are a lot of private initiatives. There is a lot of concern by people. When you were proposing yesterday the question of what's your USP, the USP of your product. Well, I don't remember the
Unique selling point.
Yeah, unique selling point. Yeah, I was thinking. Well, everybody will answer the same, and it's going to be well. It has been home produced, and this this is a good This is a good Sonda Casa. Yeah, this is a good. This is a good, let's say, slogan for selling food here in Galicia. I especially like in my hometown in Burela, in the North Shore, if you remember, my presentation, the tuna fish production is the port in my town. We are the most important port in fishing tuna fish in the north third coast of Spain. So my mother goes every Friday. We have once a week an open market. She goes every Friday to buy tomatoes there, and the quality of these tomatoes are amazing. You can't find them in a supermarket. See? And that's an added value, yeah. And I'm concerned about it. I would like to have this here in Lugo and have time to go there to buy them.
What's the secret about those tomatoes? Is it only they talk to them nicely and they grow better, or?
They've been local produced and they have been ripened in a chamber. You know, because if they are from Malaga, from southern Spain, they take them from the plant green, they put it into a refrigerator and transport.
Yeah. You can, when they're green, they can be transported.
Yeah.
When they're red, you can't be more transported.
And it's not the same as if they get ripe in the plant.
Yes.
And those that are produced in Mondoñedo, which is the lady that sells the tomatoes to my mother, which is 20 kilometers from my hometown, they ripe in the plant, and there's a huge difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say that I think that it's very important the population in the countryside here in Galicia, because we saw today in the market all people that were selling their products, and maybe this is going to disappear in the future.
Yeah.
Because they were only old people, and now the countryside are old as well.
Yeah.
Let me say something that kind of links these two ideas together. Do you know how many kinds of tomatoes there are grown in the world? How many species of tomatoes?
Commercially.
No, period. How many species? How many?
¿Cuántas variedades de tomates se cultivan los bosques?
5,000? 5,000. More. There's about 7,500 species of tomatoes. Now some of those, right, varieties, tomato varieties, about 7,500. Now some of those varieties, right, they look, have you ever seen blue tomatoes? I have.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of them. Some tomatoes never turn red, right? Some are bright yellow, some are purple.
Okay, we even have...
And so part of it, right, is if you looked in that market, there was not